Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
NBC News national security reporter Ken Delanian has been reporting on today's rather short White House meeting on election security. His story right now is on NBCnews.com. It's headlined, "The Trump administration has no central strategy for election security and no one's in charge." Ken, thanks for joining me tonight.
Great to see you, Ari. Thanks for having me.
Your story digs in deeper than just what is blatantly odd about this meeting and its brevity. Walk us through what former and current officials are telling you.
Yeah, and this is not some great scoop, some great feat of investigative reporting, Ari. This is simply talking to folks and listening to cabinet officials talk in public about their efforts to combat foreign election interference. And what they say, like, for example, the Department of Homeland Security Secretary, in an interview with our own Peter Alexander in Aspen, talked about the things that DHS is doing, working with the states on election security. But then she said, but you know what? That's not enough. We really need a whole of government strategy. What she didn't say was there isn't one. But that's what everybody you talk to about this has said. And I was flabbergasted when the White House released a statement tonight that said that there has been such a strategy since Donald Trump took office. I haven't found anyone who's ever seen that strategy. But I've talked to a lot of people who say that no such strategy exists. And what do I mean by that? Look, the FBI is doing things. They've created a foreign influence task force. They are trying to focus on this problem of the Russians and others interfering in our politics. The Russians are on social media as we speak, manipulating American public opinion. The NSA, the National Security Agency, has said that they are stepping up their efforts in cyberspace. Most of that is secret. But what we don't have is anything that knits this together. We have no leadership from the Oval Office, and this is the kind of issue that really requires it, because there are some really hard problems, like, you know, the Russians playing on Twitter and Facebook. Those are private companies. There are First Amendment issues at play. There may be required changes in law or some public policy issues. And when you don't have the executive branch leadership on this, you really lose the power of the full federal government. You don't have a strategy. You have different agencies trying to do what they can. And don't forget, some of these officials testified to Congress, including Chris Wray, the FBI director, that they had never been asked by the president to tackle Russian election interference. So it's hard to know what the White House is talking about when they say they've had a strategy from day one.
Right. And you mentioned the companies. There's also all these different states involved, and we have a system that decentralizes our elections. Something that didn't get a ton of attention was there was a proposal in the House to put $380 million into the state efforts to combat this, led by Democrats. That was defeated by Republicans there. How much does this effort also require upgrading what states can handle when the Mueller investigation has revealed how these country-backed efforts are going after individual states that may not have the cyber know-how right now?
Yeah, I mean, every state official you talk to says they need more money, they need upgraded technology, they need more resources. But I actually think that while the sort of vulnerabilities of state election systems are troubling, when you think of the three ways the Russians attacked the election, they did hack into, they attempted to breach 21 states and they got into 7. That may have been the least effective method that they used, though, Ari. The most effective was they hacked the Democratic National Committee, they hacked John Podesta,
Sure.
They stole their emails and they released them. And then the second most effective, arguably, was their manipulation of public opinion on social media. It's really even hard to measure how much influence that had on the election, and that's still going on. They may not touch a state election database this time around for their own reasons, but they are every day playing on social media. There's a website called Hamilton 68 that measures some of it on Twitter, and they're trying to divide Americans on race, on guns, on all sorts of issues. And Dan Coates, the director of national intelligence, gave a speech the other day, and he said this is happening. They're interfering in our politics. What he didn't say was there's really nothing that we're doing about it. We haven't deterred. The U.S. government, has not deterred this behavior at all. And the attempted hack of Claire McCaskill suggests that the Russians are not deterred from trying again to hack into political campaigns either, Ari.
It is Monday, the 30th of July of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is River City Hash Mondays, folks. That's right. The salon is open to all enemy of the people, whoever you may be. If you happen to put pen to paper, literally or figuratively, please have a seat. I have the French 77s available right away. In fact, they can be materialized upon your virtual table as soon as I think it. Indeed. Well, folks, what a weekend, huh? Enemy of the people. He's the people. Or they're the enemies of the people he needs so that he can become an oligarch. We are to become the vassal state of Russia. What the hell? Boy, we have some weird stories that might elucidate that opinion. A little bit of facts, and you put 2 and 2 together, and sometimes they do equal 4. Adds up. And remember this axiom: the simplest explanation is most likely the correct one. The more complex it gets to make things work, the more likelihood it's not the truth. Okay? That's one way to test it. Oh, boy. So, we've got enemy of the people. We've got BMW raising the prices of their cars. You know, tariffs. Yeah, it looks like one of the stories that we have coming up today is seems like a little bit of subterfuge. From the very top. Where have I heard that before? My God. And there's a little financial thing going on, too. You know, when they say follow the money, follow the rubles. Yeah, you follow it wherever it may go, even if they happen to pull them all out. That's when that's exactly the time that you need to follow them. Well, the Tour de France is over. That was quite an event, and I like watching it because it's a travel log. You get to see all of France. Every year you get to see a different part. And sometimes they go out into what they call the frontier, which is, you know, the border, and then they go into other countries, like Belgium, or they might go into Spain, like they went into Spain this year. It was great. So, that's over. We do have the Tournament of Nations soccer tournament occurring right now. I believe it's in Connecticut. It might be at Foxborough Stadium. I think. All I know, it's on the Eastern Seaboard in one of the what I like to call the blue blood states. Yeah. And so the women's team tied with Australia last night. I think it was either in overage or just before overage. And so they move on. Yeah. Go women's soccer. What else do we have? Oh, boy. Well, let me tell you, I just need to open up a tab and it suddenly appears. Oh, that's right. Rudy Giuliani. How can I forget about Rudy Giuliani? Rudy's been on the shows today, even in I don't know, what is this guy taking? I know it's 3 hours ahead of where I'm at on the West Coast of the United States, but come on. No one can be that animated, you know, before noon. Let's be clear, okay? unless there's a foreign substance manifested. Somehow. That's one way of talking around the issue. We know Rudy's on something, because I don't know. On the other hand, Rudy loved dressing up in drag, so not because he accepts that sort of lifestyle, but because he wanted to be a clown. It was clown makeup to him. And when he sits in the chair in the green room and they're making him up, or maybe it's not in the green room, but they'll sit in the chair and then they'll wait in the green room for a while with a little tissue underneath their collar. And he thinks it's just clown makeup again. And he goes out and he acts like a clown. And we know what that's for. Mm-hmm. You're looking at the little yapping dog going around in circles trying to bite its tail. Next thing you know, the town's bank is being robbed. All right. Well, since there's so much to talk about, let alone the Koch brothers breaking with Trump, you create Frankenstein and sometimes a monster might turn on you. Mm-hmm. And not in a good way either. Oh, boy. Well, reap what you sow, mofo. Reap what you sow. What else is on the rest of the menu today? Well, that was Ari Melber's panel with Ken Delanian, the national security reporter there, breaking it down. And I think it's on purpose that we have a lack of leadership at the top for cybersecurity and our election systems. Let's be clear. And I don't understand. How did this guy get, all this money in cash from the Russians? I mean, he seems like so transparent. But then how did Carter Page get picked up as, a Russian asset? I always said that, the problem with, other countries trying to adopt certain or trying to understand certain aspects of American way of life, they tend to always take the most facile part of our culture. And it's been elevated into, what anthropologists would call a cultural determinant. One that actually determines specific norms and behaviors in a culture. So, and that was joked about. I mean, the two Czech brothers in the Saturday Night Light skit with Aykroyd and Steve Martin. That's taking one of the most facile parts of our culture and elevating it to being a cultural determinant. But it's not. It looks like a caricature, doesn't it? Indeed. And so it's not unusual to me that a Carter Page or a Donald Trump would be chosen by the Ruskies. I'm sorry. I meant Russians. I don't mean to use some sort of weird, xenophobic term. But in this case, I don't know. It sounds fun to say Rusky. I think the Ruskies are up to their own old tricks again. And, the two little spies, Natasha and the other guy, Boris. Yeah, well, they're characters too now, aren't they? And that was on purpose. It's called self-reflection, folks. Self-reflection. Enough of, I don't know. I was listening to Alan Watts. I got to stop doing that too much. Because, it kind of bleeds in, and the next thing you know, you're like espousing, I don't know, life is suffering. Got to stop that. On the rest of the menu here on the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Trump Health Office lies to millions with fake reports and data in a continuing effort to undermine Obamacare. Well, nothing new about that. Can't beat them on the principle or even with the actual votes. Just lie and commit subterfuge. They're up to their old tricks again. Speaking of which, the Agriculture Secretary admits that Trump's farm bailouts won't cover the losses from Trump's trade war. It's almost like he's fighting with himself. And Trump tells the American military to surrender large swaths of Afghanistan as the U.S. negotiates directly with the Taliban. I don't know, sounds like a guns for hostages type of thing again. Could be. Or maybe they're setting one up. After the break, we move to the chef's table where a corporate media sports columnist argues that a college football player picking class over media day interviews sets a dangerous precedent. Yeah, college kid going to class instead of sitting in front of a bunch of inane questions in a state he doesn't live in and he has to foot the bill for. Yeah, that sets a dangerous precedent, folks. And in a move that experts call unprecedented, Russia sold off almost all of its U.S. holdings before the Helsinki meeting with Trump. Follow the money, follow the rubles. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you'll notice that the chat room link is down there at the rightish of the page, monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be attending and working, by the way, at Netroots Nation 18 in New Orleans, and she'll be on Radio Row and roaming around. So look for her if you happen to be there, and she'll look for you. And maybe we'll get an interview or, an opportunity for one of us to interview you, whoever you may be. But regardless, Kelly needs to be fed, and we're still raising funds for that because all of us are, they always put these events when, like it's not convenient sometimes for those who live month to month, shall we say. So, if you could help out, that would be wonderful. It starts, really Wednesday, and we need to make sure that she gets fed. Otherwise, look, blood sugar gets messed up, a little low. You start fainting. You don't want that. So please, resistance radio is hard enough. So thank you for your generosity, and we'll get those links to our Contribute Donate buttons at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, up current, and because really here at Netroots Radio, we are unable to do this without you. So thank you for your generosity, and you can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Wow, that's pretty easy. Even on Facebook, it's Netroots Radio. That's nice. And you can also, if you wanted to, you could follow me at Justice Putnam. That's pretty easy on Twitter. And then it gets a little difficult because if you want to follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter, you have to go to at Cookbook West. Don't ask me why. It just happens. But if you were to just type in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, it'll give you at Cookbook West. I don't know. It's just whatever the gods in the algorithm tell you have to do. I'm just a subject to it. At least in that instance, I argue I had no free will. Okay? And everything else, free will, my choice, suffer the consequences. Oh no, did I choose that? Yes, you did. And you can follow, if you wanted to, though. This is where it gets easy again. On Facebook, you could follow the show on West Coast Cookbook. Yeah, there it is. And also, I guess, in summing up, podcasts of the show can be found by way of Spreaker, TuneIns, iTunes, YouTube, etc., etc., etc. So please do. Oh, and rate and review wherever you can. We want to push the show up in the search somehow. Why would anyone choose a name with W, which puts you way at the back? Because, I don't know, consonants and alliteration mean much more to me than sometimes placement on the grocery shelves. Oops. Yep, that's what happens when you live by your, I don't know, decisions. What? Enough of that. Let's get on with this, with the rest of what we have here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Okay, this first one is by Oliver Willis out of Share Blue Media. Trump administration officials running a key office within the health department have been caught manipulating studies and reports in an effort to undermine Obamacare, support the administration's anti-refugee stance, and push an anti-abortion agenda. Wow, the trifecta. According to a new Politico report, staff say the political pressures to tailor facts to fit Trump's message have been unprecedented. The Office of the Assistant Secretary for Planning and Evaluation within the Health and Human Services Department traditionally works to track the effects of health care programs and to help inform the public on health care issues. But under the Trump administration, the office has been repeatedly caught publishing false data. In one instance, Trump's health office generated a report alleging that a majority of states saw premiums and costs double under Obamacare in 2017. Well, that claim was rated false after a Republican senator cited it in a Facebook post. The fact-checkers took note of serious methodological errors in the analysis and called it flawed. In another study, Trump's health office claimed millions of people would get health coverage if Obamacare was repealed. Well, that finding was at odds with nearly every independent analysis. The Trump administration even doctored a report made by consultants of McKinsey & Company in hopes of scoring a political victory. A source there said they used numbers and graphs from McKinsey and slapped their own labels on it to help Republicans in Congress attack the health care law. A report that found a benefit to having refugees in their country who pay taxes once they are in the U.S. was quashed. Instead, HHS issued a 3-page report that alleged refugees use more resources than the average American. And the report echoes the Trump administration's attacks on refugees and immigrants, reflecting Trump's own racism, because that has been a racist trope, not supported by the facts. Let's be clear about that, folks. A staffer revealed that political leadership was adamant that all references to LGBT health issues should be taken out of the health office's strategic plan. In addition, language was added to HHS literature for the first time to reflect the view of anti-abortion activists that life begins at conception. Well, that would be, I think, the moment that the Big Bang occurred, wouldn't it? And who can quantify when exactly that occurred? Oh, wait a second. We can. Science. Between 2015 and 2017, the office produced 43 reports on Obamacare's impact on rural hospitals, women's health, and other sectors in American health care. That output has dramatically dropped, with only 3 reports on health care coverage since Trump assumed the presidency. How nice. Trump famously said in a recent speech, "What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening." At his command, a vital government agency whose work affects millions of people is proving him right for all the wrong reasons. Martin Sismar from Raw Story brings us this next offering here at the Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays. Donald Trump's own agriculture secretary said on Saturday that planned bailout payments will not fully compensate farmers for the losses of Trump's trade war. We told you so. U.S. Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue spoke with Reuters about the matter at a G20 meeting in Buenos Aires and made it clear that Trump's welfare payments will not cover the losses farmers will endure. Obviously, this is not going to make farmers whole, Perdue said of the payments, which will come through as soon as September. We expect the checks to go out in late September or October, just in time for the midterms. Wow, isn't that weird? Such a coincidence in the timing. Very convenient. Huh. Yep, and as soon as they prove their yields, Purdue said, they will be based on actual production, not historical averages. Wait a second. How many times have we heard that before? Bistro Cafe, part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, is also another offering by Martin Sismar out of Raw Story. Donald Trump's diplomatic team is negotiating directly with Taliban officials as he surrenders large swaths of the country to the Islamists who gave safe haven to the terrorists responsible for the September 11th attacks. The New York Times reports that Trump's State Department is negotiating directly with Taliban officials with no involvement by Afghanistan's government. Negotiations with the group, which is waging a civil war against the government that the U.S. has supported since the fall of the regime, reportedly took place in Qatar last week. At the same time, Trump has the American military surrendering large parts of the country to the Islamic extremists who led a campaign of terror against the Afghan people and cooperated with al-Qaeda in the 9/11 attacks. The Trump administration is pushing Afghan commanders to surrender rural and sparsely populated areas of the country and focus on protecting cities, the Times reports. Trump's surrender strategy will effectively ensure that the Taliban and other insurgent groups will hold on to territory that they have already seized, leaving the government in Kabul to safeguard the capital in cities such as Kandahar, Kunduz, Mazar-e-Sharif, and Jalalabad. Trump's surrender in the country comes as an acknowledgement that he cannot lead the American military to victory over the terrorists responsible for the most traumatic attack ever launched against the U.S. government on American soil. Trump had previously claimed to have a strategy to defeat the group, saying that the Taliban need to know they have nowhere to hide, that is no places beyond the reach of American might and American arms. Well, of course they're not out of reach. Here, let's give you a leg up. Well, that brings us to the... this is a surrender strategy. Thanks, Trump. Make America great again. Oh, all right. Let's, like I said, get to our break, and we'll come back and go through weather from around the world. And then we'll finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Christopher Intagliata. When you burn your tongue or cut your cheek, the pain can be intense, but the wound heals pretty quickly compared to injuries elsewhere. That's because all the factors needed to repair a wound are ready to jump into action in oral tissue, because a new study shows that proteins called transcription factors, which control all those healing elements, are present at greater levels in the mouth. You can think of those controlling proteins as theater directors, and the healing factors are the actors waiting in the wings.
They are ready to go right on the sidelines in the oral epithelia, so the director says, come ahead, and then they're just right on stage.
Maria Morasso, a senior investigator at the National Institutes of Health. She says that's not the case in regular skin tissue.
They have the capability of coming on stage, but they're nowhere close. So you have to go through that step of getting them in the stage to be able to go ahead with a function.
Which delays healing.
It might be difficult to have the play finish on time and according to the script.
The study is in the journal Science Translational Medicine. Morasso and her colleagues also tested this idea by genetically engineering mice to have more of those factors, the directors, in their regular skin tissue. And sure enough, those mice had significantly faster skin wound healing than did control mice. But we can't genetically engineer humans. Instead, Morasso says, if we can learn more about who the healing actors are, then perhaps we can find targeted ways of sending those individuals on stage to deliver a better performance for patients. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Christopher Intagliata.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury, and ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance, or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/study, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. I'm Mark Gage. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson announced that every human being has certain unalienable rights, among which are those to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But what did he mean by the pursuit of happiness? To answer this, we should bear in mind that in writing the Declaration, Jefferson said he was not attempting to put forth an original philosophy of his own. Rather, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind, that is, the opinions held by most, if not all, Americans of his time. It is difficult, however, to say with precision what most Americans in 1776 thought the pursuit of happiness meant. Since Jefferson did not invent the phrase, the best we could do is discover its source and determine what it meant to its originator. Almost surely, Jefferson read about the pursuit of happiness in John Locke's Essay Concerning Human Understanding, 1690, in which he discusses how the human mind operates. Locke writes, "As therefore the highest perfection of intellectual nature lies in a careful and constant pursuit of true and solid happiness, so the care of ourselves, that we mistake not imaginary for real happiness, is the necessary foundation of our liberty. The stronger the ties we have to unalterable pursuit of happiness in general, the more are we free from obedience to an immediate impulse for some pleasure." That's all for today's podcast, 60-Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
You can help stop the Trump agenda in its tracks. Make sure you're registered to vote. Go to rockthevote.org. And on November 6th, vote for Democrats up and down the ticket. This message, a public service from all the fine people of netrootsradio.com.
Shame on Massachusetts Governor Charlie Baker. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The Massachusetts State Senate, as part of its budget, included provisions that would have guaranteed basic rights, and I mean really basic rights, to immigrants in the state by telling law enforcement to not ask people about their immigration status and instructing them to not collaborate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. In essence, to stop acting as voluntary immigration enforcement agents, it's an unfunded mandate, something they have no legal obligation at all to do. But the House budget did not include those provisions, so as is customary, the two budgets went to a conference committee to be reconciled. And when the budget came out of the committee, those provisions had been disappeared, which is apparently exactly what Governor Baker wanted. Carol Rose, the executive director of the ACLU of Massachusetts, said in response that Governor Baker has abdicated his responsibility to public safety and chose to deny immigrants even the most basic and narrow due process protections that makes everyone in Massachusetts safer. Make no mistake, Rose went on, the decision enshrines the politics of fear and silences the politics of hope and compassion. This is disgraceful. Decades from now, history will judge how Massachusetts' leaders treated immigrants at this time. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1977. That was the day that members of AFSCME Local 1644 began their unsuccessful strike in Atlanta, Georgia. The union was made up of 1,300 mostly black sanitation workers. The city of Atlanta had elected its first black mayor, Maynard Jackson, in 1973. According to historian Manning Marabell, members of the sanitation union had campaigned aggressively to help Jackson become mayor. Many thought he would be sympathetic to the needs of working people in the city. The sanitation workers' hopes were disappointed when they received no raises for 3 consecutive years. Their average income was $7,500 annually. This put the workers below the city's poverty line. Since the Memphis sanitation workers' strike of 1968, AFSCME had emphasized organizing black workers in southern cities. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated while he was in Memphis supporting the strikers. As the nation mourned the death of the civil rights leader, the Memphis strikers had won their first contract. But the sanitation workers in Atlanta would not win their work action. On April 2nd, Mayor Jackson fired the striking workers. He aligned himself with what Manning Marabell has described as Atlanta's corporations, media, and the leaders of the Black Party's bourgeoisie. Some black leaders publicly criticized the workers for striking against the city's first black mayor, accusing them of undermining hard-won black political power. The city's black middle class, by and large, did not support the strike. After a month, the strike was effectively over. Workers returned to their jobs with no improvements in their wages, hours, or conditions. And the hard-learned lesson that what politicians say at election time is not always what they do once they get elected. Like what you hear? Check out laborhistoryin2.com.
What's in a name? By definition, the name of a person, place, or thing is its personal designation, a distinct way of being known to others. Unless, of course, it's the opposite, a label meant to disguise who or what a person or thing really is. In other words, a fake name. Hiding one's true identity can be done for many legitimate reasons, but it's widely used these days by flim-flammers and corporate front groups. For example, Restaurant Workers of America is not made up of waiters, cooks, bartenders, etc. It's a front group for chain restaurant owners who oppose raising the sub-minimum wage of their actual workers. Such AstroTurf citizen groups often hide behind patriotic-sounding names like Americans for Prosperity to run massive campaigns of deceit to benefit the corporate sponsors at the expense of the public interest. And now, from out west comes a brand spanking new group, Cowboys for Liberty. What a positive moniker. Cowboys are seen as down-to-earth, straight shooters, and America is all about liberty. But wait, is this just a front for corporations wanting to grab our public lands? Au contraire, as the old cowhands say. It's an audacious, fun-loving network of hell-raising climate change activists who are out to expose, shame, and defeat the corporate-serving profiteers behind the climate denier industry. They chose the cowboy image both to symbolize the true West ethic of defending Mother Nature and as a spoof of the Orwellian perversion of language by dishonest corporate powers. This is Jim Hightower saying, but Cowboys for Liberty is more than a name. It's a public campaign to unveil the shameful, avaricious individuals who are behind climate change pollution, putting their personal wealth and political advancement above the well-being of all other earthlings. Join the campaign at www.whydeny.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. 2 days after President Trump and European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker announced a surprise pause in an escalating EU-US trade war, European officials are still trying to make sense of where the trade relationship stands. Juncker, a veteran diplomat from Luxembourg who'd made headlines only days earlier for appearing intoxicated at a welcoming ceremony for President Trump in Brussels, left Washington victorious, having somehow found a free trade antidote to counter Trump's protectionist inclinations. According to the Wall Street Journal, Juncker's task was aided by color-coded flashcards that presented a streamlined case for ditching tariffs. It seems Juncker's economic primer played a role, but Trump's trade position had also been softening behind the scenes.
I think President Trump has been getting a lot of backlash against his threat of trade wars.
Fred Bergson is a senior fellow and director emeritus at the Peterson Institute for International Economics.
I don't think it's so much industry groups as it is the domestic agricultural groups, others in the domestic Trump constituency, average citizens who see the prices of their products going up, along with the people whose jobs are jeopardized by export losses.
The EU and US certainly end the week with less daylight between their trade policies, but the road back to normal trade relations is long. French President Emmanuel Macron said Thursday the EU won't cut corners on the environment or food safety to give in to US demands to import more American agricultural products. He also added Europe expects to see Trump drop aluminum and steel tariffs that had previously been levied on national security grounds. Absent that, all of the talk of resuming friendly relations will remain just talk.
They are looking for rectification, and unless something is done on that, the whole initiative probably will falter.
Luke Vargas, the United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. River City Hash Mondays, folks. All right. Weather from around the world always begins along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently, 65 degrees. We're going to be a little warmer today. We'll be about 102, 103. Still under an active air quality alert. Unhealthy air quality index at 165 parts per million. Ouch! Yeah, that's not good. We're going to have a low in the mid-60s tonight. Winds right now are out of the west-southwest, about 1 mile per hour, will increase to 5 to 10 miles per hour later on, out of the west-northwest, and then we'll shift out of the northwest later on this evening at its usual 5 to 10 miles per hour. Grass pollen is moderate. That air quality index, once again, is unhealthy. Daytime UV index is down a notch at 8, but still very high, so take care. High pressure dominates once again at 29.94 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles because of the smoke. Humidity right now is at 59%. Might stay there. It's been a bit muggy the last few days, so that could be because of the smoke. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 72 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 83 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 91 and sunny with a heat advisory that could knock out infrastructure. Kiev is 87 degrees and fair. Kabul is 80 degrees and fair. Hong Kong is 82 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 80 degrees and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 48 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California currently is 51 and cloudy. And New York is 80 degrees Fahrenheit and fair as the Big Apple can be. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. I always love when I don't know how to put it, like people who are at the essence of what they're doing, they're covering their ass, protecting their jobs. Now I can understand protecting your job. That isn't, that might be honorable, but sometimes attitudes about a job changes, and those, the old school guys are kind of doing it wrong. You have to admit that a lot, right? So I don't know how old this particular sports columnist is, but I can see he certainly doesn't care. This story by Lindsay Gibbs out of Think Progress also reminds me of an essay I wrote way back. Boy, this is in the 80s. And late 80s, maybe. It was after My Dinner with Andre. Remember that one? Yeah, with Wally Shawn. And that was a great movie. All it was a conversation. And it revolved around a dinner. And, you start off with an appetizer, and then you moved into, like the soup course. And the conversation really mirrored, the timing of this dinner experience. And, but the essay that I wrote was modeled on that, and it was called My Dinner with Augie. I had the great fortune or misfortune, depending on how you look at it, to be seated next to Augie Garrido, who at the time was the baseball coach at Cal State Fullerton. And at one of my favorite sushi bars back there in the day, in my little area in North Orange County, California. And we got to talking. And, of course, my father, just as a little tidbit of information here, was a professor of history at Cal State Fullerton at the time. And even though I was tried to be a college athlete, sports was my form of rebellion growing up, because my dad really didn't want me to be a jock. And in time, I understood why. So I justified being a jock by excelling in school and, volunteering and all of that. Okay. And so school to me always had to take precedent over the sports, and I tried to make them equal. And I followed that old romantic notion of the gymnasium and the academy and, all of that stuff. Well, yeah, that really works today. And this story is about Bryce Love, who goes to Stanford. And apparently there's a media day that the top college athletes are expected to show up for. And this one happened to be out on the East Coast. Now, Bryce Love was the runner-up in the 2017 Heisman Trophy competition there. So, yeah, he was, not even graduated yet. And he's trying to graduate in December, so he's taking summer classes because he's pre-med majoring in human biology with an interest in pediatrics and stem cell research. Not, just your normal college kid. Except this one happens to be, the runner-up of the Heisman Trophy for 2017. Now, it wasn't as if he missed this media day. He Skyped it in. But that wasn't good enough for Dennis Dodd, CBS sports columnist, who thought it was an absolute disgrace. Yeah, he thought it was a disgrace. Now, I love the example that he gives. He says, try to envision Tim Tebow. The guy who always used to take a knee before the game? Yeah, what was he doing? He was praying, wasn't he? That's what he said he was doing. He was praying. And so what are the pro athletes and other athletes doing when they take a knee? In this protest to stop cop killings or just killings of black people in general, or people in general even. They are taking a knee and they are praying. But imagine Tim Tebow. In this situation, like what Bryce Love is doing. Dodd says in his heyday, skipping SEC media days because of, school, Dodd wrote. Right or wrong, that wouldn't have happened. The need to better himself. The conference and his school would have outstripped another summer school lecture. Another summer school lecture. The reason I brought up Augie Garrido is because he thought his job was more important than the teaching that was taking place in the university that had hired him to coach their baseball team. And he told me without irony, if we could just get rid of these egghead professors, we might have something here. That's a direct quote from Augie Garrido. No joke, complete seriousness. Thanks, Augie. Well, the notion of what Dodd wrote, and also I would say the notion of what Augie Garrido said, reads like a parody. Dodd is upset because Love, a student athlete whose only compensation is in education, because the NCAA's outdated racist notions of amateurism keep him from being paid, decided to prioritize his education. And I can't remember the lecture that he Another summer school lecture. See, the thing is that Dodd thinks, because this is probably his experience too, in some ways. Summer school was, makeup classes. You didn't really have to show up, and there wasn't really anything important about it. That doesn't happen at Stanford, though. Those student athletes are expected to be students.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
All right, finishing off here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, River City Hash Mondays, is an article out of Crooks and Liars by Nicole Bell. Well, it looks like Vlad is up to some subterfuge here. Nicole says, I can't claim to understand fully the implications of this, but it does seem important. The Russian government has sold off the vast majority of its holdings of U.S. Treasury securities for reasons that remain mysterious, in a dramatic move that experts are calling unprecedented. A U.S. Treasury report released on July 18th shows that Russian holdings of Treasury securities declined by 84% between March and May, down to just $14.9 billion from March holdings of $96.1 billion. The report was issued quietly amid the controversy surrounding Trump's July 16th meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Helsinki, dropping Russia from the list of major Treasury holders without comment. Benchmark 10-year Treasury note yield saw a spike during the mid-May to a 7-year high of 3.11%, possibly indicating excess supply during the sell-off, but yields quickly stabilized, indicating that any Russian bond jumping had little effect on the overall market or the U.S. government's cost of borrowing. Part of the reason it had little effect speaks to the economic strength of Russia on the global stage, which is relatively minor, about the size of Italy, if maybe a little less, even. One might assume that this liquidation prior to the Helsinki meeting would indicate some nervousness about anticipating stronger sanctions and being unable to access the funds. But come on. This is Trump and Putin meeting without any other officials. Putin can't possibly be worried that his puppet is going to be tough on him. If anything, they've indicated they're prepared to go much, much lighter. Indeed. So others have speculated that this is a warning that they plan to adversely affect value to the American dollar in the future again, as Russia's... Oh, somebody's trying to call me. How dare you? Well, okay. So it wasn't mentioned once in the Sunday shows. It was also not in any major print outlets, though CNBC's online article poo-poos the significance of such an unprecedented move. Of course CNN would do that. Or perhaps it's just such an underreported story, and what coverage it does get doesn't connect the dots, that the markets haven't had a chance to react. Either way, it's worthy to put a pin on this story and see what the long-term impacts will be as we learn more about Russia's election hacking and how the related investigations pan out. Yes, indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. But that Networks Radio will broadcast on throughout the day for breaking news. We'll visit with you tomorrow for Terrytown Chowder Tuesdays here at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. But do stay tuned for breaking news as it breaks throughout the day on Networks Radio. And we'll visit with you tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.